So you're all very welcome to the webinar. Just going to be talking about playing basketball in the USA. So Paul Cummins is going to lead the conversation. This is Paul, a talk Paul does regularly at his Sports Stream Academy camp, of which Drew has worked many times, and John and Sean that will be on there have been campers on there. So it's a subject Paul knows a lot about. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks to everyone for tuning in tonight. I know it's a unconventional time, but it was the best we could do. So I'm just going to kick off, guys. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll just bring you through a little bit about what we're going to cover today and what you'll hear from me for the first 20-25 minutes, I'd imagine. And then I'm going to kick over to Drew Dawson, who's going to have about 10 to 15 minutes with a slot there, and there's some prompt questions there. And then the same for John and the same for Sean, who's going to join us. And just to let you know, Drew, so I do run SDA and have done since 2013 on the back of my experiences of playing in the USA. And as Matt said, John and Sean, who'll be joining later, have both been campers and have gone on to play in the US. And Coach Drew actually coached me in America, and he's come over and worked SDA numerous times as well as a kind of a coach at camp. So we've got a really good panel here to hopefully shed some light on the process, the challenges, as well as the potential opportunities, etc. And yeah, as I said, you'll hear from all of us, and hopefully at the end then we can do our best to answer some questions that you may have. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you can see that match, yeah? Okay, so yeah, guys, what we're going to cover today is a little bit about the cold hard facts. What's the reality in terms of trying to play in the US, especially when you're from a country like Ireland? Some key information on the process itself, some scholarship opportunities with key links. Going to focus a bit on the academic side, and again with key stories and key resources around that. Because academics are so important. A bit about my story, I suppose how to get there if you're a young aspiring Irish athlete. The wake-up call is certainly when you get there, and that's something that being Irish, myself, John and Sean can certainly speak to, considering our background. Some supportive tips, put myself in your shoes at your stage of development. Bit about the Irish scholarship opportunities too, and the UK, because there's other opportunities there for players of different types of levels. And then I'm going to hand you over to Coach Drew Dawson, and then over to Coach John Carroll, and player who's currently playing in Spain, and then to Sean, who's currently playing in Germany. So some of the cold hard facts. First thing just to keep in mind, guys, is that about 2 to 3% of high school players in the US actually end up playing college basketball. And that's right through the levels, Division 1, 2, 3, junior college, the whole work. So right out the gate, if you think about it, the odds are stacked against anybody in America, and let alone anyone outside of America actually going on to play in college, because it's a very high level. And then out of those 2 to 3% that play in college, about 1% are actually foreign players. So again, if you think about that and think about the challenge, especially when a lot of the foreign players would be from different type of countries where basketball standards would be higher, let's say, than in Ireland. Being Irish, it's a very, very, very difficult thing to achieve. And I think that's important to keep in mind in terms of expectations. The reality is that I suppose good or great is not enough. You really need to be exceptional. And it's not just exceptional as an athlete or as a basketball player, but it's exceptional in the classroom as well, because that just does open up a lot of opportunities for you. You need to bring something special to the table, and that certainly is the case when you consider how competitive the landscape is. One of the key things is, what do you bring to the table that's different from what's available already, whether it's being an excellent defensive player, being a really good shooter, being a really good all-rounder, let's say, or if it's something unique that you can bring to the table and actually add value to a team, be it at the high school, prep school, college level. Academics are just as important as your playing ability, and one of the reasons is, first and foremost, you can't play unless you're academically sound and can actually be a good student. Certainly when it comes to scholarships and financial aid, good academics really open up a much larger pool of options, which really can help with the process for sure. So that's something to really keep in mind, guys. Really focus on the academic side, because it is a big part of actually getting opportunities in the US and third level, be it in Ireland or the UK as well. So some key information on the scholarship process itself. These are things that can really help. Okay, so I wanted to just outline these. The first is to try and be the best that you can be, right? That goes without saying. I know you're all developing athletes and you're working on your game, hopefully. I know this has been a specifically challenging year for everybody, but my heart really does go out to developing players like yourselves and parents of that, that literally can't get out there and compete given COVID-19. But stick with it, keep working on your own and keep developing your games as much as you can. Being selected for a national team really helps. Okay, it's certainly easier to gain recognition if you are playing for your country, and even just in terms of exposure at international tournaments, it's a nice notch on the belt when you're looking to try and actually play overseas. Making connections is key. So networking with the right coaches and people who, I suppose, know the scene in where you're trying to go, be it in the US or elsewhere. Getting in early. So one of the big things, and Coach Drew will probably talk a bit about this, is that a lot of programs, doesn't matter what level it is, they really start recruiting at an early level. So if you're thinking about going and want to play overseas, you have to start planning as early as possible. Attending elite summer camps is really good. Again, in order to actually be spotted and get on someone's radar, you really need to look into either attending summer camps, let's say in the US, or going to elite camps, like Sport Dream Academy. That's the reason I set up SDA, was to actually help kids over here get their game noticed and actually get on the radar of some of the coaches in America per se. So being spotted and actually getting a profile and getting your name out there is really important. Sending over game film. So once you're on the radar, it's important that you actually have good game footage, and typically having highlights is really important, so you can give a coach a sense or a flavor of what type of player you are and what's your profile and how you'd fit with the program. But if they're interested, they're immediately going to want full game footage. So certainly having full game footage is important, as well as a highlight film, because they really want to see what the competition's like. Academics are really important, just as like I said. Ensuring your grades are in order is really key, because you have to actually, in order to play, you have to be registered and applicable for and eligible in terms of the academic criteria that they require for, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But the big thing too is, if you're a good student, you do have a lot more options in terms of every level of play in America. Think about other avenues to third level. So there are programs like exchange student programs or residential students in college or high school of choice, and you can do that through general admission or potentially academic scholarships. So if you're an extremely exceptional student, there's also the academic route, where as a side you can actually play basketball. So there's other avenues as well to actually explore if you really want to go play over there. And then financial aid, again, really keeping in mind that the cost is very different over in the US. Third level education, and even high school, prep school level, depending on where it is, the cost of that is very, very high when you compare it to Ireland. So you have to be very aware of the actual financial burden that may be there in terms of going over. Obviously a scholarship will cover the majority of that, but even at that, flights and living expenses and things do really come into play, and you need to keep that in mind. So financial aid is another way in which you can access support, and obviously if you're a good player and a good student, there's more options in terms of the aid you can get as well. So what are the opportunities? Well, the first one would be high school. And again, the advice really we give here is that it's probably ideal if you're a TY, if you're about to go into TY or TY kind of option. And if you do have the opportunity to, let's say, do an exchange program or actually get to a high school to play basketball and study, it's a good thing to do. The other thing is, you could have a network, or you might know a high school coach who'd be interested in actually, having you over. So the high school level is the first. Then there's prep school, and what prep school is essentially 1 year following second level graduation over there. So after you graduate secondary school, there's an additional year called a postgraduate year that you could do. But prep schools act as high schools with a PG year as well. So you could go earlier and kind of do the equivalent of 5th and 6th year over there, one or the other, and then do a PG year. Again, there's some exceptional high schools in terms of academics and basketball, and the same at prep schools. In fact, Coach Drew Dawson coaches the Choate Prep School, which is one of the best in the country. Junior college, and again, Sean can speak maybe a bit to this, but that's a 2-year post-secondary school that can offer an associate's degree, and you can then transfer those credits to college and university. So it's another option. Again, really competitive basketball scene, and what it is really gives a landing board to where if you don't have somewhere, but you can actually get into a junior college, it provides you that exposure where you can actually play and study and get seen by possibly a university. So if you think about what Sean did, he actually went to Santa Fe Junior College first out of Ireland for 2 years, and then Longwood came in and offered him a scholarship from there. So there's different routes basically. NCAA Division 3, it's financial aid only, it's not scholarship, and there's some absolutely fantastic academic schools in this division. Also, the basketball is very, very competitive, but there is no scholarships at this level. But it's important to know that if you're an exceptional student and a good basketball player, this is certainly an area to look at, because the academics that are in some of these Division 3 schools are second to none. And certainly they could offer very good opportunities beyond your basketball career. Division 1, and they do offer academic and athletic scholarships, and it would be considered the second best collegiate athletic level in the US. And then there's NCAA Division 1, which is academic and athletic scholarships, and it would be considered the best collegiate athletics and academics. So that's the level that Drew, John, myself, and Sean played at, and Drew ended up coaching at that level as well for about a decade. One thing I will say, guys, is that, whatever opportunity that you might be, might present itself, if you're lucky enough, and if things transpired where you do have an opportunity, you must make sure that it's academically suited to you, it's athletically suited to you, and that it suits you in the long term. And there really are 3 key things that I drive home, because there are a lot of stories where kids get opportunities and it doesn't work out because they haven't really asked themselves those questions to begin with. And to be honest, it's not worth taking unless it's right for yourself and your families. Academics, so there's qualifications that you need. And again, the way it works basically is that in the States, the 2 big things are your GPA, and which is your grade point average, and then there's your SAT, which is basically your scholastic aptitude test. Okay. And they're the 2 aspects. So typically, if you do have an opportunity, what they'll do is they'll look at your transcript in Ireland, and they'll transfer that over to a GPA in the US. And then SAT, the SATs, is something that typically 5th and 6th year students take over there. And that's very important to actually qualify or be eligible to play at the college level. I explained GPA there, but basically it's on a 4-point scale, with a 4.0 essentially correlating with an A average. 3.0 is a B, 2.0 is a C, and 1.0 is a D. So the higher you can get on that GPA, if you're in a high school environment, the better options you will have in terms of playing at the next level. And that's why academics are so important. The likes of Lafayette, for example, wouldn't take a fantastic player if they didn't have a good GPA or SATs, because it just doesn't fit with their actual program. The student might struggle when they get there, and that's something to keep in mind. There's a lot of schools in that bracket. SATs, again, just to explain, they are typically taken by 5th and 6th years. Most institutions will require the SAT in addition to school qualifications. And again, there's a bit of information that I'll have in the next slide to show you how you can actually take them here. So testing in Ireland, a lot of standardized exams required for entrance are actually administered here. There's some really good websites there. The first one is probably the most relevant one. If you're not an English speaking student, you'd also be required to take the TOEFL or the TOEFL essentially, but the SAT, which is, you can find at the www.collegeboard.com in terms of where to take them. That's something that would be required regardless. And again, like I said before, if you're really planning to go, the earlier you actually look into this stuff and register to take it, the better. SATs is something you can take repeatedly too, and then typically the more you take them, the better you do, and it widens your options. The application process. So you basically apply, and you can search different schools to apply for. Your application should include obviously your name, age, address, your nationality, the qualifications you have, etc. You know, your proposed major. If it's undecided, that's okay. So what do you actually want to go to college for? When do you want to begin the course? And again, how do you plan to finance your education? So that's something that will be discussed with, usually if you do have an opportunity, in tandem with the college athletics program. So if somebody is very interested in having you come as a scholarship athlete, obviously you'll get support with the application. But as I said before, there are avenues to where you can apply for these schools, and if it does fit your own personal need, you can potentially get in as a student, and potentially a student with financial aid, and then walk onto the basketball team and try and earn your stripes in that way as well. So there's different routes to end up going over there and playing. But no matter what you do, the application process is key. And then when to apply, again, really 12 to 18 months before, if possible. Application forms for, and this, we're talking here about college. Usually they fall in the autumn or the fall term over there, which is beginning August or September. And each university has its own deadline, which could be as early as November the previous year. So you really need to allow for 6 months before that to process the application, identify what schools may be interested in you. Are you interested in them? And that could be through an athletic opportunity, or it could be through you doing your own homework and research. And basically, the earlier you can get that ball rolling, you will be in a better position in terms of the actual process itself. Again, the earlier you can apply, the better academics you have. If you're a very strong athlete, all of those things help with opening up your options. And just as a caveat, this is options within a very, very, very narrow window, as explained at the beginning, because it's very, very hard to play at any of those levels, and also study over there too. This is a good resource, guys. I'd recommend it. It's qualifax.ie. Again, it's just information about anyone planning to study in America. So it looks at the application and the kind of educational side of things. And you can see there's different links here, but one of them is actually Irish SAT centers and how you can actually take the SATs here in Ireland. So I'd certainly recommend looking into that if that's something you're keen on. And these are then just general links on US scholarships. So, you know, you don't have to copy these down furiously. I'll share this presentation with Matt, and he can forward it on to you. This is a really good key resource. And I think Drew mentioned it the last time we were talking, but you can go and actually, if you're thinking, how do I make contact with these schools, or how do I find out what schools are where? Obviously, the best way of doing that is you know, doing your own research, and the NCAA directory is very, very good for that. You can search a ton of schools at the third level, and you can search their websites. You can look into their basketball program. You can look into their athletic standards. You can actually reach out and connect with the school in terms of the application process potentially as well. And that's something that I'd certainly urge you to look at, just to get a sense of the actual types of schools, where they are, what they're like. But obviously, it really helps if you can actually at that stage be identified as a rising prospect. And the only way to do that is to, as I said, go to a camp like SDA, or try and get over there and play in summer camps, or be seen as one of the best players in this country, which will just open up opportunities and interest in the US. So a bit about my story, guys. At 16, I was named Junior National Player of the Year. And through, it was actually, I played in the national team, and Bill Dooley at the time was running the Irish basketball program here. He got to see me play, and he just thought I had what it took to play in the US. His buddy coached a high school team in North Carolina. So actually, right before I turned 17, I moved to North Carolina, and I accepted a aid, essentially a scholarship to play in Ravenscroft, which was a high school team, a private school in North Carolina. So I left right after TY, essentially, which is a risky thing to do, because obviously I took the gamble that I was going to go over there, and if I got injured, or if it didn't work out, I would have had to come back and complete my education here. So it's completely up to individual choice. I thought it was a risk worth taking. A lot of parents don't, or kids, and they could be well correct in that. But there's different a lot of different variables come into this. But I went over, it worked out for me. I had a good career there. And I committed to Lafayette at that stage. But Lafayette had a feeder prep school at the time, and they wanted me to go and do a year prep before joining Lafayette to put on some weight and to I suppose get higher level experience too. So I joined what was the top ranked team in the US at the time, South Kent. I had a good year there. And then I played at Lafayette for 4 years, and I was coached by Coach Drew Dawson, who's going to talk to you in a little bit now. He was a great influence on me as a player and a person, and I had a fantastic time. But it was very, very hard too. There was a lot of work, and there was a lot of luck in actually getting to the US. But once you get there, really, that's when it all begins, because the level of competition is very different, and there's a lot of things you have to navigate. The whole time I did well on the court, but I also did well in the classroom. And again, that certainly expanded my opportunities, because the likes of Lafayette and those type of schools, Patriot League or Ivy, were interested in me because I had the grades. And again, that's an important thing to think about. And after that, I came back and I played professionally for a little while and furthered my education. And I know John and Sean will talk a little bit about their experience as well. John's was very, very eerily similar to mine, and Sean's was quite different. So you can see that there's different ways and routes to actually ending up playing in the US at the highest level. So how to get there, a little bit of repetition here, guys, but the first thing is you really have to want it, and want it badly. And I'm sure most of you do, right? That goes without saying. You have to work harder than you can imagine. And I will say that many of you might think you're working hard, but you're probably not, compared to what level you might need to be working in order to open up those type of opportunities. So again, that's hopefully an encouragement for you to really keep working on your game. Making a name for yourself here is really key. Because again, people start talking, and have you heard about that kid from Ireland and this, that, and the other, and what does he do that's different, or what does she do that's different, and how could they benefit our program here, whether it's men's or women's. And by the way, I meant to say this at the beginning, but everything I'm saying here applies to both our female listeners and our male listeners, because it's the same process. Okay. Achieve good grades. Again, make connections and build a network. And oftentimes you may know somebody, through basketball circles, or through your club, or somebody who knows a high school coach, or somebody who knows a prep school coach, or whatever it might be. You might know someone who could get you into a camp in the US, whatever it might be. Making those connections and trying to build your network is key. Take opportunities when they arise. And that's not just, let's say, there's a coach looking and you're gonna really step up. I'm talking about your own game and your own academic profile. Everything is an opportunity to get better, and you really have to stay on that and stay with the process. And be proactive. What I'm here to do is help you understand the ins and outs of this, and to show you how difficult it is, but also to show you that you can plan and you can give yourself, I suppose, the best shot at making the opportunity. But part of that is being proactive, getting on the NCAA directory, looking at the application process, planning early, taking care of what you're supposed to be doing on the basketball court, making connections, trying to get to elite camps. All of those things is all under the umbrella of being proactive. So having a profile, having game footage, having highlights that you can send and circulate to coaches along with your interest in playing at the higher level, they're all really important things too that you can be doing on, or can be working on, and that really is up to you and how much effort you want to put into it. I actually can't read that last part, but I can't read that last part because it's blocked by the Zoom. But I think you gotta, I think it says even with all of that, luck plays a part, I believe. But it's basically, you still need an element of luck, because anytime you go, you could always get injured. It's always a bit of a gamble, but that's the pain and the beauty of basketball and about kind of develop. So you do need to understand that it's very, very difficult, guys, and girls. And part of this, what I'm doing here today, is to set expectations. You really need to be realistic with yourself in terms of what your level is, what your ceiling is. Obviously, continue to dream and push as high as you can. But if you're not at the level of, let's say, a Division I athlete and student, it's going to be very hard to play there. And there's going to be a point where you have to have that reality check, and as a result, maybe shift your strategy and look at a different level, or look at, as I said, there's tons of good scholarship opportunities in Ireland as well, and in the UK and other places. So luck does play a part, but also you have to be real as well, and that goes for players and it goes for parents as well. So for me, when I got there, guys, a bit of a wake-up call. First thing was adjusting to a new culture. This wasn't Ireland. This was the US. Everything was different. And I'll be honest, compared to when I went to where America is now, it's even more vastly different. So adjusting to a new culture is always a challenge. And I will say some people are better at doing that than others. And you need to be honest with yourself. And again, your parents will really know best when it comes to this too, in terms of what it is you're able to do, not just on the court, but off the court, in terms of living with maybe a host family like I did, going straight into a kind of a dorm like Sean did, and like John did at IMG, where you're suddenly thrown in with a bunch of strangers and you have to basically compete to make the team and to kind of grow your game. So it's very, very different. And some people adjust to it better than others. A new educational system. I will say Ireland prepares you very well in lots of ways, but it is different. One of the big key differences, and this is something you need to be aware of, is that in Ireland, we typically have big exams that you can kind of coast through the year to a degree, and then really, if you're in so way inclined, cram and academically, push to do well in like our state exams, like the junior cert, the leaving cert, in order to get a result. Whereas in the US, it's all about continuous assessment. They have weekly quizzes, so you can't take your foot off the gas, but they don't have massive state exams. The big thing is that you stay on a weekly basis on top of your grades, and then on the other side, the SAT score, which is really key as well. And as I said, that's just one exam. It's about 3.5 hours, and you can take it as many times as you want. Missing family is a big one, obviously, and friends and your social network here. And again, you need to be real with yourself in terms of what you're capable and able of doing. It's a brand new game. That was something I really was aware of when I first got over there. I was used to, I suppose, I found things pretty easy in Ireland, just because I was of a certain athletic standard where I knew I could find success doing certain things. Mainly going to the basket here was constantly my game. Whereas when I got to the States, the athleticism was so much higher. The things that worked here just didn't translate, and I very quickly had to adjust as a result. But in terms of what's different, the intensity of the game is much, much higher. Defensive intensity, talking about really good athletes pressuring you constantly. The athleticism is completely different. Think about the best athlete you've ever played against, and that's kind of who you're going to be seeing on a constant basis. And then the strength as well, in terms of just the physicality on the other side of the floor, is really, really different. So you have to be ready for that, and physically ready too, building up your body, your fitness, your strength. Very demanding. So coaches, big focus on details. Again, if you think about the most demanding coach you've had here, they pale in comparison to probably any coach I've ever had in the States, even at the high school level. So you really need to be aware of that. Had to make huge changes to my own personal game, again, adjusting from going to the basket for focus on doing that some of the time, but I really had to develop an outside shot. I really had to work on my defense. I really had to work on my size and my strength and my actual fitness and everything. So learning to basically adjust in order to add value to your team. As I said at the beginning, what do you bring to the table was something that I had to do very quickly. And I think so did John and so did Sean. And that's something that any Irish player that goes over has to do, and they realize it quite quickly. And then being able to manage time and represent yourself, to be professional and to be mature, to stay on top of your practice, to stay on top of your academics, all of that type of stuff is really key. Because again, one mistake, a lot of American kids can get away with making a few mistakes before they get sent on a boat. Whereas for us, it's one mistake and you're gone. And that's something to keep in mind. So some supportive tips, guys and girls. The first is, I would really reiterate managing your expectations realistically. And that's not to tread in your dreams at all, but it's to just understand the challenge of the actual options you may have, purely down to the statistics. If you looked at my first slide, and the I mean, to be honest as well, even with COVID-19, that's really disrupted things this year. It has made things more challenging as well. So it is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's not to say it can't be done, but you do have to do a lot of things to help your chances. And one of those is have a plan, to practice the right way, to play with confidence. Don't be afraid to step up here in Ireland and really be the best on your club team, your school team, your Irish team, and continue to not be satisfied with that, because the level that if you do go anywhere on a scholarship, especially into the States, suddenly that level goes from here to here. So you really need to continue to push. Take care of school. Academics opens doors. Put yourself out there again as much as possible. Create a network. Who do you know that might know somebody? And don't be afraid to open up a conversation. Creating profiles and game footage, guys, really key. Take opportunities when they arise. And I would say, I think an important thing for me, it may not apply to everybody, but certainly for me, I used basketball and as a vehicle as well I mean, it was my absolute 24/7, and I ended up, having a wonderful time, and I ended up playing professionally, and now I coach and I love what I do, and I started SDA and all that. But what it really helped me do as well is actually get a good education. So I was able to get a master's and move on and do other things, and that's really important. The other big thing that I take away is some of my best friends are still my teammates from high school, prep school, college days. And I was able to develop myself and travel and see another part of the world. So when I look back, that was the most value, more than anything else, was the connections I made. And then enjoy the journey. It's not about the destination, and that's something really important. I think if you really want to be the best you can be and drive your ceiling as high as you can, you have to focus on the process. And if you have a plan, you practice the right way, you look after your academics, you really develop your game, you do all of those things, ultimately you will give your best chance to reach that ceiling. Now that ceiling might be, John Carroll or Sean Flood playing Division 1, or it might be Division 2, or it might be D3, or it might be a scholarship at a college here in Ireland, which is a great opportunity as well. And that's okay. But the big thing is that you focus on the journey and try and push the envelope as much as you can to get the most out of your ability. There's also Irish scholarship opportunities. And again, their sporting scholarships are offered in most third level education here. And again, students can basically, a scholarship can only be received after a student has secured a course through the CEO form. So just keep that in mind. And all ITs and universities offer some sort of sports scholarship. So again, if you take care of all of that, that's always something that you could look at. And it's a great thing to have a scholarship to go to an Irish university. There's some general links on that, which again, you will get afterwards. And then the same applies in the UK. Again, this UK has great standard too, and it certainly recognizes good athletes within the basketball circle. It used to be more focused on track and soccer, but they've widened that net big time. And a lot of colleges and universities in the UK are linked with professional teams in the BBL. So it's a nice opportunity there to actually go and develop your game too. Some links on that as well. So just before I hand you over, that really was my bit there. And I know I did see a hand come up, but I just didn't stop the chat because I wanted to, I think the format here is that any questions will be discussed at the end. But basically, before I hand you over to Drew, Coach Drew played 5 years at the NCAA Division 1 level. He was an exceptional point guard. And he has a decade of NCAA Division 1 coaching experience after that. As I said, he coached me at Lafayette and was a fantastic coach. He comes over and helps coach at SDA and has done for the last number of years. And he's currently head coach of one of the top prep schools in America, Choate, and he has helped numerous Irish and international players actually on their journey. So I think Drew's going to be a fantastic resource here. And basically I've just have a few prompts on the slide here, Drew, that you can either work from or not. But I'm going to hand you over to Drew basically for the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Well, good evening. First of all, I'm looking at my dome, my picture in this PowerPoint, and I didn't realize my head was this big. So I knew I had about 4 hair follicles left in life, but that's up close and up close and personal. So hopefully through the Zoom screen, as I talk, it's not that inundating. But first of all, I just want to say good evening to everyone. It's a crazy time that we're all navigating with COVID-19. I don't want to belabor that, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point that out. And just obviously, I hope everyone is safe and well through a very unusual time, and certainly as unconventional of a coaching experience navigating, my season or lack thereof with basketball. So I'm happy to be here tonight. Obviously, I'm very close with Paul Cummins. Think the world of him. I very much enjoy. In fact, you saw one of his stats as one of the leading 3-point shooters in Lafayette history. I was fortunate to coach him, in his journey, and there was a lot of big shots made by him and great memories, just at Lafayette in Easton, PA. And then I've gotten to know Coach Hall and certainly think the world of John Carroll. I've had a chance to watch him play in the States along with Sean Flood, who I think will be joining us if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to dive in, just to give you as much, obviously we've been on here for a little bit now. So I think the best way I can do this is really just cut to the chase on some of these points that Paul is laying out here. And then obviously it sounds like we have a Q&A, correct, at the end. So that will give us an opportunity to just, layer that on, as we want to here. So the biggest thing, I'll just go right down the line here with U.S. coaches. What are they looking for? I know Paul introduced me, but I have a unique experience in that I played Division I, probably was better suited for Division III. I was anything but a star. I was not as good as Paul or John at the college level. I was very much a role player. So I have a unique set of experiences from the standpoint of I'm really obsessed with giving the right counsel on what the right fit is for student athletes, especially kids trying to come from abroad into the States and participate and compete. Fit is just critical. So from the onset, I'll say that, you can't belabor the right fit and being open-minded to what that fit is enough, so that would be just what I would say from the onset. But having been a role player at the Division I level and then having coached Division II nearly a decade back at the low mid-major Division I level and now at the prep school level. So I've sort of covered the whole gamut, if you will, of the American system outside of, obviously the NBA. Coaches are looking for someone, especially when they go abroad, that is obviously well-versed, well-rounded, academics being a huge part of that. Like if you go outside, the 500,000 players that can matriculate from high school to college here in the States, and you're going to venture off throughout the world. And obviously the world is very flat. There's talent everywhere in the world. That talent is more accessible than ever before. But if you're going to venture abroad looking for new talent and players to bring to your program, there's still a process to that in terms of getting that student athlete through the admissions department. And if you're not academically sound, I know I probably sound like your folks. Hopefully, I can't see all the participants, but if you're a player, student athlete, you should be looking at your parent or guardian right now and shaking your head and smiling that, okay, you're right, mom and dad. So the bottom line is you need to be academically sound, and you need to assure the American coaches that if we go, we go the extra mile to bring you into our schools, that there's, especially with the differences in the educational system. That's not to say the Irish system is any better or any worse. It's different, as Coach Cummins pointed out, with the cultural differences, et cetera. So you have to be academically sound, that you can do the work, and you can do the work being away from home for the first time. That being said, you have to bring something different. Like John Carroll, he was a player with size at 6'7". He's multi-dimensional. I don't want to give him too many compliments here on the Zoom call and get his head big, but he was a heck of a player, guys. And when you look at him and the profile of him coming over from Ireland, he had great size and strength at his position at 6'7". He could guard multiple positions. He could stretch the floor, meaning he could shoot with range. He had an IQ for the game where he could almost go from being a 4-5 man to acting as a 4-3, 3 being more of a big wing, and getting himself into multiple actions, 2-man games, et cetera. So not to belabor that, but just to have a little coach speak here, that you have to be able to do all the things academically and culturally and be a great human being and great teammate and coachable, et cetera. But then you have to be talented and not only talented, but bring something different to the table. Again, there was 480,000 players, student athletes that went on to play at all levels in college, less than 1% to the highest level in America, Division I. So it's not just talent, but then it's leaning into what you do well. Like, are you a throwback pure point guard? Well, then you really have to show that and build on those strengths. I just, complimented John's game. Obviously size is something different. There's just less big people walking yours. So if you have height, I know the game has gone in a positionalist direction, but if you can bury your defender inside, if you can establish the block early and often, if you can play out of the post, well, don't lean away from that. Lean into that, because as these guys will tell you on this panel, frontline play is a dying art. So again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that, but academically sound. There's plenty of information that Paul just went through to keep yourself posted on that, what you need to do and what you need to think about with the academics. Obviously, the big decision then with the leaving cert, which I won't talk too much about that because I'm not as educated to it, but that's obviously a big part of the decision. And then as a player, like bringing something different and beyond just even being exceptional. Now, let me just say one other thing about that. The only way you're going to know where that talent level is and what you're bringing different to the table is by getting honest feedback from people that have been there. So you look at this panel, John Carroll, Coach Hall, who's the senior technical director of All Basketball Ireland, obviously has been around the block. I've had many chats with him about players in the game and coaching in different levels. Paul's background speaks for itself. Sean Flood, Pat Price, Paul Keller. I mean, we could go on with a number of guys throughout the country and the infrastructure that Basketball Ireland has built to get the necessary feedback. You're not going to know what the right fit is if you're not honest with the feedback and lean into the data that's being given. Okay, so that's the start. So there's a lot of times kids will reach out with footage and they'll send emails and highlight films, and it's with all due, it's obviously with all due respect to those players and those families, and you never want to tread, as Paul said, on a kid's dreams, but it's just so far off. The perspective is so far off from where the fit might be for those folks. So get honest feedback, be coachable, do your work early. If there's people, and I know there's people because I'm friends with many of them, there's people in the country that can give you that feedback even before you start to waste your time or spin wheels reaching out to American programs, schools here in the US. Having coached at is by the way, Paul, interrupt me, is this sort of what you're looking for? You can,
it's perfect.
You can help me navigate. Hopefully I don't get too wordy with these answers, but let me know if you want to navigate in a different direction.
That's perfect.
The SDA, again, I don't want to sound like Eddie Haskell, the old Leave It to Beaver, but the bottom line is Paul's done a great job with this, and Matt obviously is a part of the senior staff and helping build out different initiatives. John and I have had a blast coaching at SDA, so on and so forth. Like, this is one of the resources, and again, I'm biased because I've been a part of helping direct SDA and coach there, but the bottom line is that's a perfect resource. This is exactly what I'm talking about as a former Division I coach, Division I player, and now prep school coach. A place like SDA, Sport Dream Academy, I know there's a few others, but obviously I'm familiar, and Paul, you've done a great job with this, where you can be coached by people, by the very same people that you're trying to follow, and that dream that you're chasing. So, if you can get involved in different programs, the dev camps that you guys have set up, another way to rub up against coaches who are qualified and can give you the right feedback. And John, maybe you can speak to this in a little bit, but John goes to Hill, he plays at the University of Hartford, he's been around the block. I mean, he's even though he's a player and he's busy as a pro in Spain, I'm sure he'd be willing, without being overly inundated, to say, hey, this is what you might want to think about. Certainly my contacts can be shared and I can give you that feedback. But I would say the biggest thing with Irish athletes, once you kind of figure out what your level is to make sure you're really continuing to get better at the things that obviously, that gap that you need to close, and maybe be in another set of conversation about the possibility of coming over. I will say this, we have 300, and don't quote me on this, but 340 million people in our country. It's not the largest country in the world, but it's certainly a large country and a very diverse population, and it's becoming increasingly diverse. It's very athletic. The athletes in the U.S. and I'd say that, the world's flat. I mean, we're in the 21st century. The world is very flat, and that's another point to this whole thing about finding the right fit and doing your homework and being, dreaming big but being realistic. We're recruiting everywhere in the world, and there's players. I mean, look at the NBA. It's what don't quote me on this, but I believe, guys, it's almost 20% international players now, 18 to 20% foreign players. So the world is flat. There's talent everywhere. The athletes are bigger, stronger, faster everywhere. Certainly in the U.S., where basketball is a prime sport, it's extremely competitive. So if you think you're going to outmaneuver, out jump, out physical many of the top flight athletes in the U.S., you're fooling yourselves. It doesn't mean there's not good athletes and strong athletes in Ireland, but you would be foolish not to really lean into your skill development. Really lean into skill development, not skills to get through the drills, skills to operate in game situations. I think that's one of the biggest things that I know Matt Hall and I've talked about, Coach Hall, is just the idea of playing to a drill and playing the game situations and situational play. You need to really work on your skill development, your basketball IQ. If you see what's going on in the court, do you have then the subsequent triple threat skills to execute on that? So not to sound too wordy or heavy about that, continue to get better as a player, continue to study the game. I know sometimes it can be hard, especially during COVID, to chase games, but learn the game, study the game, work on the craft, make it a priority. Obviously, academics, family come first, but you have to, when you come to the US, you're not only dealing with the athleticism that's to the nth degree, but kids have been playing this game. It's like in Brazil, how soccer is in Brazil. There's a reason the Brazilians are some of the best soccer players in the world, because they play it all the time. It's the skill and the athleticism. There's huge synergy between that. So what you give up in athleticism here in Ireland, you have to really lean into becoming a better player development, skill development, basketball IQ, etc. Okay, I can't beat a dead horse enough on that. How can Irish athletes help their chances? I would go back to networking. I think that's something that we need to hammer home. And again, you have Coach Cummins, Coach Hall, Coach Carroll. I don't want to put them out as, I know they have lives outside of all this, but the bottom line is folks like this that can get your foot in the door. I'm certainly a resource for everyone in Ireland. By the way, I will tell you, I had my wife and I waited a little bit to settle down and have a family, but I had my first son, Liam Andrew. I had a baby boy, and he was born on St. Paddy's Day. So that goes for something with you folks. I know here in the States, we get so caught up in our heritage and where we come from, everything else, and we celebrate St. Paddy's Day. So, you need to be a little lucky, and I'm hoping my family will have the luck of the Irish, having a baby boy on St. Paddy's Day. And part of the way you can be a little luckier as an Irish player is, it's about who you know. So if you can get to someone, get honest feedback, put the right materials in front of them, and they're willing to put a paragraph on your email or at least be a reference for you, including me, if we feel you're that level, that's definitely a win for you and can increase your chances as an athlete there in Ireland. I think Paul's done a great job with this PowerPoint. I mean, you're going to share that, Paul. So in terms of resources, there's a ton of links on there. I think there's plenty of resources there. And then just lastly, advice from me. The world is flat. That 480,000 players here in the States has now ballooned to millions of players. It's not to kill anybody's dream on this call or webinar, but part of how you find a fit in anything you do in life is to be open-minded enough to have the right perspective, so your chances of finding that fit increase. So continue to educate yourself. The one nice thing about the world today is kids, they're the technology, they're native to it. We're living at a great time in human history. Again, not to sound heavy, but we have access to so much information, and that's including basketball, skill development, resources around recruiting. So then it's how do you process that and apply it to your situation, and do it honestly and do it with the right feedback, and be a willing learner. Like some of this stuff about that sounds cliche about those who've gone ahead of you or being coachable. It's just true. Like be a sponge, take the information, and that will help you, be a little more accurate in what the right fit will be. I'm not going to get in the weeds about all the different levels. Paul did a great job with that. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat, but just thematically, I would say in order to find the right fit, you have to be honest. You have to take the feedback and apply it, accordingly. And then all the while, you got to keep getting better. And that's academically, because this thing will end, and then athletically, because there are a lot of different ways to do this. And that's one of the things you see here in the States. So many kids look at just Division I, and they miss so many great experiences at so many different levels. And one of the things that some of our players that we've taken a lot of pride in, Paul, this just even going back to the Lafayette days, it's a lot of guys now are catching on to even different ways to do it from the States over here in terms of being a pro. Some guys are going to pursuing their master's degree where they study by day and then they practice with the pro team and play by night. They may not make a lot of money, but the bottom line is they're seeing the world. They're it's personal development. So just stay open-minded to all that. So I don't know if this was a little more generally speaking. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but hopefully that helps, Paul.
That's great, Drew. Thanks for that, Drew. It was really helpful, I think. And again, it's great that just want to thank everybody for jumping on, obviously, to the panel. But Drew, it's great that you tuned in from the US to give some of your feedback and experience, again, really kind of from the horse's mouth in terms of your background and your understanding of the game in the US. So thank you very much for that. And again, we will be coming back at the Q&A, and we can do our best to answer some of the questions. We may not have all the answers, but we'll do our best in terms of our collective experience. So thanks, Drew. So guys, I'm going to move on to John Carroll now. So John was actually SDA camp MVP in 2013. John played 2 years at the IMG Academy in Florida, and then he played 1 year at the Hill School in Pennsylvania, where they ended up being state champions that year, I believe, John. Played 4 years at Hartford University, which is Division I, and John currently plays in the Spanish League Leb Silver, and he is a senior Irish international. So again, John has been very heavily involved on the coaching side of SDA. He's obviously a great ambassador for what SDA do, and through his own experience as well. I think he'll be a great help in terms of this kind of webinar. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Paul. And if anyone wants to jump in, Matt, Drew, Sean, or Paul, just let me know. So journey first. So my journey started, I played with Cubs. I started playing basketball when I was 12, and I only played club because we didn't have a high school team. So I was at CUS in town. So I played with Cubs for 4 years, and then I won the Ronnie Delaney scholarship my transition year, and I used that money to go to IMG for camp, basically. And then after 3 or 4 weeks of camp, they offered me a scholarship, a partial scholarship of, I think, maybe 3/4 the tuition at that time. So I decided to go there. And as Drew and Paul were touching on earlier, like, it was a major adjustment for me. I'll talk about that a bit later, with the physicality particularly. And then after a couple injuries and sort of adjusting to the talent level, I didn't get any Division I scholarships, and I felt like I was a Division I player. So I left. I graduated from IMG, actually went to SDA in between IMG and the Hill School, and met Pete Schwedhelm, who we were talking about before the call. And he helped me get in contact with a prep school named the Hill School, which is sort of a similar level to Coach Drew's team, Choate. So I went there, won the state championship, played against NBA players before they're NBA players, obviously. I got about 15 to 20 Division I scholarships, played pretty well. Didn't get any high majors, which I was a little disappointed at, but probably worked out for the better because I played at a level that was probably more suited to me. I ended up choosing University of Hartford. I scored 1,300 points there. I was top 10 in points and rebounds. I think I'm the only player from Ireland to score 1,000 points, so I'm looking forward to someone on this call beating that record. I'm not sure about the women, but I know that's a fact for the men. Academically, I graduated 3 years with a history degree, and then I finished my MBA a couple of months ago, actually. So I got a free degree in history and MBA in 5 years in college. So that was really good. And then I went to play pro, and I went to LA and I worked out with Drew Hanlon, who probably the kids know, but your parents probably don't know, who's an NBA trainer. I worked out for the Clippers and the Raptors in LA, and I tried to make the NBA draft, didn't get picked. So I ended up going to the Czech Republic, which wasn't the best experience, which I'll go into later. But so I left the Czech Republic, played in Spain, needed surgery, got surgery, and then I'm back in Spain now in a better situation. So that's basically my journey to date. So adjusting to the US game, which I said I'd get back to physicality. So my journey's similar to Paul, and it seems like my adjustment's sort of similar too, because I was probably one of the most athletic players in Ireland when I was 16 or so. And I did try and like work on skills a lot, but I did rely on my physicality, and I went from being one of the most athletic players in Ireland to never being in the top 5 athleticism on the court at any time when I was at IMG. Just seeing crazy things, getting dunked on in practice will really humble you and realize that you need to work on your skills more so than your physicality. 99% of people listening to this, that applies to. And then also just thinking about egos, like American guys aren't afraid of playing selfishly, and you'll realize that when you go over there. A lot of times they're out for themselves, and being in Spain, like everyone's all about playing the right way and stuff. That's not really a thing that happens in America quite as often. So you need to maybe adjust to rebounding more and playing defense and just getting on the court however you can, because you can't score and you can't play well on the bench. So do whatever your coach needs you to do. I definitely say that. Key tips for Irish athletes. One thing is, like, I think Ireland's getting better with this, but a lot of times Irish guys don't stick it out, particularly the guys, and they leave early. I would definitely say stick it out to the end of the year, because as Paul said, you have to like critique the place before you go. So if you've looked at it properly, you probably made a good decision at the start. So just ride it out, and you never know what opportunity will present itself. I've seen a lot of players who didn't play at the start of the year end up starting by the end, and then they're so glad they didn't leave. And then also keep up a connection with the Irish teams. I didn't really do this, and I regret not doing this. Just like you want to be like within the national program around it, because it's probably the most fun time you'll have playing basketball, is playing with your country, and it's probably the least selfish time, like least selfish you'll ever be, or your teammates will ever be. It's like playing for each other with the Irish jersey on. So if you have that opportunity, you definitely should take it, and I'm definitely going to take it in the future if I get picked. What do Irish work on? Oh yeah, so Drew mentioned this, and I touched on it there about physicality. It's shooting, and this is the thing that, like, when I'm coaching at SDA, I'm sort of, I wouldn't say shocked, but I'm sort of disappointed. Is like there's no knockdown. There's knockdown shooters at SDA, and in America there really is. Like almost every team has a guy who's a knockdown shooter, and he might not even play college basketball, but he's hitting 9 for 10 if he's left open. So that's one thing that you can really work on without, like, there's no disadvantage to being from Ireland in that sense of working on shooting. And the other thing is dribbling. Like you can work on those two things no matter where you are, as long as you have a ball, obviously, and you just have the time and the work ethic. So there's really no excuse of having your shooting and dribbling not being up to par, especially if we're not the most athletic country. And then I would also put defense in that, just because I don't know if Coach Drew could talk about this, but if you have a guy who can shoot, knockdown shooter, who won't turn it over and play defense, it's probably hard not to play that guy 30 minutes, just because it's kind of rare in America and anywhere in the world, really. So those 3 things are very controllable and not really taken advantage of, in my experience in Ireland. The pro level, the biggest thing with the pro level is consistency, especially if you're a foreigner, which you guys will be if you play professionally. Is you need to show up, like, to work every day like it's a job. and you need to show up prepared, because one bad day can spiral into a bad week, and that bad week can get you shipped out of there, especially if like the coach doesn't like you, or like there's always a bit of animosity between the locals and the imports. So you need to really show up for practice and every day. And then the second thing I would say would be like do work off the court. So the three main things for that would be sleeping a lot, stretching, taking care of your body, and lifting. Because a lot of times you have 2 practices a day, maybe a lift as well, and then you might have a game the next day, and depending on your coaches, you'll have practices after the games the next day. So you really need to get enough sleep. I probably should put nutrition in there too, but it's sort of obvious. I have a Whoop strap to track my sleep and workouts. I wear it every practice before games, making sure I get enough sleep. That's really been helpful. I probably should have been doing that in college, but I started it actually this year. General advice. For me, I was always into this, but I watched a lot of film of myself, and then also of players that are like semi-realistic. So if I want to look at, like, say, pick and pops, I'll look at Kevin Love. I like to see his footwork. He sort of have the same rhythm in my jump shot, so I'll look at how he gets into a jump shot. If I want to see a handoff keep guy, I like to look at is Kelly Olynyk. Even though I think I said someone, we're basically the same player, but he's 7 foot. It's kind of true, but like he has the same type of athleticism as me. So I want to see how he keeps it and gets by guys who are more athletic than him. With general advice as well, this is more general, but it's like surround yourself with like-minded people in Ireland. So just find the guys that want to play all the time, want to shoot all the time. If you want to be a shooter, like I said before, you need to shoot 1,000 shots a week, I'd say. Game shots too. So, you're talking about 200 game shots in a day will really get you tired. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is for sure. So yeah, surround yourself with like-minded people. And then the last thing is, I'd say be humble, but don't be too humble. And this is a bit of an Irish like disease almost. It's you feel inferior because you're Irish, and maybe added to that is you're an Irish basketball player who, we only have one player ever played in the NBA. The fact that you're Irish matters for about a day and a half when you're over there, and then after that, all that matters is whether you hit shots when the guy passed you, or whether you rebound or whether you defend. I played against Duke and Cameron Indoor. I played in pickup games where I'm the only player not in the NBA. Like you can be in awe for about 2 seconds and then you need to play. So I'd say that's about it.
That's great, John. Well, firstly, I think, if I'm just put myself in everyone who's joined this call, if I'm in your shoes, I'm loving hearing again from the horse's mouth, not just kind of about John's journey, but also what it's like to play at the pro level. And you can see John's career has really, really gone on an upward trend continuously. So firstly, thanks so much for those really good words of advice. I think they're really helpful. And also thank you for taking the time, John. I know you're busy with your pro schedule too. And we wish you continued success in your season.
That was one thing I just wanted to say, Paul. Drew was saying earlier, is if anyone has any questions, just message me on Instagram or Twitter. I get people message me all the time, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not that busy.
Yeah. Thanks a million, John. That's brilliant. Okay, so now, guys, we're going to move on to Sean Flood. So a bit about Sean. Sean was SDA co-MVP in 2015. Sean, just as an aside, was Mike point guard when we won the cup. So I very much know what Sean's like as a person on and off the court, and he's one of my favorite people. Played 2 years at Santa Fe Junior College, which is interesting. So Sean took a different route to John. So he could talk a little bit about that, I'd say. And then, through his hard work and grit, he ended up getting a scholarship to play at Longwood University for 2 years, which is Division I in Virginia. Sean currently plays with Arvado College Wizards in the German League Pro B, and Sean is also an Irish senior international. So again, fantastic to have Sean join the call. Thanks a million, Sean, and I'll just hand it over to you now.
Yeah, cheers for having us on as well, Paul. So, just to start my journey. So, as Paul and John were saying, they kind of took a very similar route in terms of high school, prep school, straight to Division 1. So, my route was a little bit different. Growing up, played with Temple Oak since, I don't know, probably 5, 6, through the academy all the way up. Was part of the Temple Oak team to win the first national cup for the club with alongside Paul. So that was fun. And in between, I had a spell over here in Germany for 8 months playing in the under-19 Bundesliga. So I did that for 6th year of school. So I was lucky enough to have the team over here pay for teachers to teach me the Irish curriculum over here so I could still finish the Leaving Cert. So played here for 8 months, came back home, finished the Leaving Cert, and in between 6th year and heading to the States, played with Temple Oak in the Super League, which was obviously a valuable experience, getting to play against grown men, the physicality and everything obviously takes a big leap from playing underage basketball no matter where you're playing. So from there, I was lucky enough with the help of Paul and Pete Schwedhelm, who has also been mentioned on the call a few times, infamous Pete Schwedhelm, to get a gig over in Santa Fe in Florida, in Gainesville. So was very lucky, played 2 years there, loved my experience. And from there, again, got the help of Pete Schwedhelm and my coaches there after having a pretty successful career to commit to Longwood University, which was a Division 1 in Virginia, as Paul said. Same thing, 2 years there. Got my degree in business management with a minor in marketing, so academically valuable in that sense, and also got the experience of playing against some very high-level players, some high-level teams, and being exposed to some high-level coaching. From there now, this is my first year playing professionally in Germany, so it's kind of the start of a new chapter of my basketball career, which will hopefully kind of kick on from here. So yeah, quite different to Paul and John's journey, but just shows that there is a number of different ways to get to the highest level of basketball in America. It doesn't have to be a set blueprint, and obviously mine is just one of many different ways that it can be achieved. John and Paul have set theirs, and lucky enough now Ryan Leonard has also followed kind of my route in doing 2 years actually at Santa Fe as well in Florida, and has now transferred to a Division 1 school. So it's just shown that there's different opportunities, different ways to do it. So that's kind of a little bit about my journey. Then adjusting to the basketball in the States, obviously it is a big jump. It's quite different, as well as just kind of the physicality that John, Paul, Drew have mentioned. Just the competitiveness of basketball is a lot more competitive every day. Practice, everyone's there to really get after it. There's no kind of just being in the gym to be in the gym. You're in there trying to earn minutes, earn time on the floor, and obviously being at a JUCO, you're trying to earn a scholarship to another university. So for anyone who doesn't know about junior college, you just kind of are there for 2 years. It's a 2-year course. I think Paul was actually mentioned that earlier on. So yeah, it's 2 years, and then you have to transfer on from there. So as well as competing in practice with your teammates for playing time, you're essentially competing with your teammates and obviously all the other players in the junior college, high school ranks to try and get NCAA Division 1 scholarships or wherever it is. So yeah, it's quite competitive in practice, not just for the reasons mentioned, just obviously because people love playing basketball. So then some more differences that I found was just obviously the level of athlete. Irish players aren't as athletic, and you're never going to be the most athletic guy in the gym or on the floor, as John and Drew touched on earlier. There's always going to be more athletic guys, but that doesn't mean you can't bring something else to the table and be better in aspects that they might lack. So yeah, the level of athlete was definitely way different, way higher. And then obviously the game changed too, from playing kind of a very structured, every time down the floor we call an offense, slow it down. If we have no layup, let's work, get a good shot. Then when I went to my JUCO, it was very much we're getting up and down. As soon as the balls jumped at the start of the game, we're there to play. It's kind of, it nearly looks a little bit hectic at times, but you have to be ready to go right from the jump. There's no kind of easing your way into the game. So one thing as well that I found quite different that probably will come off differently than from John. He was talking about the physicality. Yes, as a guard, the physicality is a lot more too, but just the speed and quickness of guards in America is just ridiculously different. Like, we don't have many guys in Ireland who are just have that real fast twitch muscle fiber, who are just get it and go. They'll blow by off the first step or off the dribble. It's kind of more pick and roll oriented, but just the level of speed and quickness that you've to adjust to as well is something that you have to be wary with. And then the next one, some tips for Irish athletes. So first of all, if it's something you're gonna think about doing, you really have to love the game. You can't go over there half-heartedly, I'll just kind of see how it goes. I think maybe loving the game is probably the most important thing, because you're going to go through ups and downs over there. I'm sure everyone here has been through ups and downs in basketball, but it kind of puts it into a bigger perspective when you're living further away from home, and instead of just a car journey, it might be a plane journey or a FaceTime call away. So you really have to, I think, love the game. So second, John kind of touched on it more so when he was talking about his life as a pro. I think having your body in physical condition to get ready to compete every day in practice and for the game. So for Irish players going over there, one thing I've seen that I know for me, I was definitely behind on, and I've seen guys now going over who I think are behind on just from my experience, and it's just like how our bodies are. So I think, luckily, like I'm sure Drew will be able to speak on this at his prep school. I'm sure guys are in the weight room every day, getting weight training in, and just making sure their bodies are in good condition to get ready to go and to get after a season. Whereas I feel it's very secondary, obviously back home in Ireland, people struggle to get gym time on the basketball court, and they're kind of looking after that. But equally as important, as well as your skill development and everything, I feel just the physicality of and how our bodies are, we need to be in better condition when going to America. So John touched on it as well. Consistency of shooting. Going over there, as I was saying, John was saying, you're not really going to be the best athlete in the gym, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't be the best shooter in the gym. And that's one thing I really fed into, and I always felt on my teams over there. So obviously was there 4 years, so part of 4 different teams. I felt I was either best shooter, best 2-3 shooters on my team every year, and there's no reason why anybody can't be a high-level knockdown shooter. As John was saying, that when you're open, when you touch the ball, that you're gonna knock down the shot. I think that's something that that's nearly a standard for Irish guys or Irish girls traveling to America. Be that person on the team who's gonna make shots. John also touched on it. The dribbling, you have to be comfortable with ball pressure. So guarding over there, people playing defense, it's a lot more intense. You're going to get picked up. You're going to get after. People are going to get after you, and I think you need to be able to be comfortable with the ball pressure, and obviously apply ball pressure on the defensive end yourself. But you have to be able to play against the pressure, especially if you're going over there as a guard. That's kind of your job, essentially, obviously, to be comfortable with that, get us into the flow of our offense, get into the rhythm of our offense, and you can't be taken out of your positions or off your spots just purely because of how much ball pressure there is. You have to be comfortable in that aspect. And I think, as I said earlier on, you just have to be ready to compete at practice. Everyone is there for the same goal. It's kind of not like back home in Ireland where people are just kind of doing it for fun. Yes, it's fun. There's times when it's not very fun, but at the same time, everyone loves it and they're there to compete and get after it. So that's something you need to be ready for every day. So then, having coached at SDA, I think I kind of covered that there in the last thing with my tips and stuff. One thing as well, Coach Drew was talking about it earlier, but find your niche as a basketball player. So obviously you have to be able to do everything really, really well, but know what you do really well and feed into it. Like don't change completely who you are because, I don't know, like you don't think that's fitted. But find your niche. If you're a good shooter, be the best shooter on the team. If you're a leader, be the best leader on the team. If you can guard, really get after people and guard people. Find your niche. And as John was saying, you're not going to sit down for much minutes of a game if you don't turn the ball over, can hit shots, and you can guard. That's just stable. Any coach that I've played for in the States, and even now over here on my team in Germany, there's guys who are great level athletes, but they're turning the ball over, you don't play. You can't hit shots in today's game, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of time on the floor. So find your niche, feed into it, and then excel in it. Obviously, you need to be more than one-dimensional. You can't just be on the floor and just be a shooter. But if you're a shooter, be a shooter, knock down shots, and find your niche. And at the pro level now, so obviously, I'm probably just 2 months into my pro career at the moment. One thing I've found that has been quite different to back home and also college is being able to just constantly adjust throughout the game. Obviously, in college, you have a lot of time to scout, and you kind of going into every game with a fixed game plan. And over here, yes, we do that, but it's also kind of, instead of scouting the team, we're kind of working on us a lot. So obviously we want to be familiar with what sets, actions they're going to run, but more times than not, where we have our defense, our rules, and how we guard things. And throughout the game, that could switch. The first quarter, you could be hard hedging a ball screen or dropping a ball screen, and then the next quarter, just after a timeout, we could be coming out and weaken everything. So being able to make in-game adjustments, I think, has been one thing that has really changed over here. Just how quick you have to be able to do all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of an expectation that you know what you have to do and you have to get to it. Coaches isn't spending a whole lot of time kind of harping on, oh, we have to be able to do this. It's kind of just expected that you're mature enough and at the level now that you can just kind of take it. He says do it, you get on it, and you can make that adjustment quite quickly. Other advice, I think I've kind of covered most of the things that I want to say, but love the game. And John was saying it too. You have to watch basketball. Like I don't understand people who say they love basketball, but you're not watching basketball and watching players that you want to be like. Obviously, everyone wants to be like, I don't know, Luka, Steph, LeBron, but realistically, that's probably not who you're going to be as a player. So go and watch players at a level that you want to play at and try excel. So for me, obviously being a more pick and roll oriented point guard, I like to watch a lot of Steve Nash highlights, a lot of Steve Nash breakdowns, kind of different even interviews to see what he says about the game, how he is kind of adjusted, being an undersized, not as athletic, but a very skilled guard, quite polished in all aspects of the game. So just kind of watch players, watch basketball at the level you want. There's so much college basketball now on TV back home. If that's what you're striving to do, you can, like, there's college basketball games on, I think, every single night. Reddit streams are online. Obviously, you can get them there. There's really, in this day and age, there's no real excuse as to why you're not watching basketball if that's really what you want to do. And I just kind of want to backtrack quickly and touch on something John was saying as well. You have to kind of know your role within the team, and that's one thing, I suppose, going into other advice. You not know your role on the team. So going over to America, you're probably not going to be the guy on the team who's gonna score 30 points a night or 20 points a night. So you have to be comfortable adapting and knowing what your coach needs you to do to get on the floor. So for me back home, I scored a lot. That was my job. But when I kind of made the transition to playing in America, especially at the JUCO level, you've teammates everyone's trying to score 30 points because they're trying to get out, or 20 points, they're trying to get out to get a Division 1 look. But your team's not going to be successful if you've 5 guys on the court all trying to score 30 points, 20 points at the same time. It's just not a good look. And to be honest, I'm sure Drew will probably talk about this if asked. He will want to recruit from winning teams as opposed to recruiting good stats on a bad team. Realistically, it's not going to be a lot of Irish guys coming over. As John was saying, he's the only one to score 1,000 points. So kind of feed into what else can I do other than scoring? Can I guard? Can I be a good assist man? Can I run a team? Can I do small different things that coaches notice and that coaches want, other than put the ball in the basket? Because there's been times, I'm sure everyone's struggled shooting the ball, so you need to be able to affect the game and people be aware that you're on the floor even when you're not making shots. So kind of fit into your team and know, like, be able to play different roles on different given nights. It could be your night to get busy and score, but it could then be your night where you have to stop the other guy scoring, or, like, I don't know, just kind of take a more secondary role. So I think that would be another piece of advice. Just kind of be able to fit in different markets and different games, and be able to kind of adjust within.
Great. That's fantastic, Sean. Thanks so much for that. And again, just listening to what Sean said and John before, as Irish players and recent Irish players that have made the journey and are on that career path, I think it's great too that we have the spread between a guard and John, even though he would say he's the best guard in Ireland, he might be more of a forward type player. So it's good that you got that landscape. And if I'm sitting again listening to this as a young Irish academy player, which I know you all are, which means you're already tracked and on a talent level that's considered some of the best for your age group in Ireland, this is really gold for you guys, and it's, as you can tell too, this is very much a real conversation. You know, nothing of this is fluffed up, or we're giving it to you in terms of what our experience has been, what are the challenges, what are the perks, you know, but also what you need to be doing to kind of reach this. So Sean, that was really good, fantastic advice, and thank you very much. So guys, just again, this is just a quick slide to show you the other SDA athletes that ended up playing in the US. So obviously Sean and John have jumped onto this call, but there's been plenty others who have gone on, and there's been plenty who've had really good experiences, really good careers as a result. There's been others who have gone and it hasn't worked out, and that's okay. There's been a lot of players that have actually ended up playing at the third level in Ireland, at the college level in Ireland. Some have gone to the UK. Some have made their Super League teams, which is hugely important as well. And I think this comes back to, you know, and I really want to drive this home, just process and keep working and take this advice and continue to apply it to reach, you know, your potential, basically, and whatever that might be. And at the end of the day, you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, that's I've done what I could, and that's what it's about. Whether you end up in the NBA or whether you end up as a Super League team member, it doesn't matter. So, guys, that's pretty much going to bring us, I think, to a close. I know we've got Q&A now with Matt. I think we've got 20 minutes or so. I think the way Matt, I know you've probably been sending your questions in. Matt's going to look at and see what's common, and we'll try and answer them as best as we can in the next 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Thanks for that. So there's a good few questions come in. I might reword a few of them just because they've come in from a few people. But just first one, I think John touched on it a little bit. Is attending camp in the stateside beneficial?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you take that. Anyone else wants to go in? But you've been there.
Well, I went to camp when I was 14. I went to UCF camp, and then when I was 15, I actually went to Duke camp. And yeah, I would say that was beneficial just to get a sense of the physicality, especially. We've talked about that a lot, but it's just the only way you're going to get it, other than being somewhere like Serbia or somewhere. So yeah, I definitely thought it was beneficial in that sense where you play against really good athletes. So I'd say yes.
If I could add to that, I second what John is saying. I'll give you just even a step further here in terms of logistics and the big decision this is. Obviously, the cost of education is out of control in the States. That's anybody that's looked into it sees that right away. It's a different system. So that being said, these are big decisions, big financial investments. And although it's not cheap to come over to camp, whether it's the flight, the stay, the camp registration, to John's point, if you can pick certain camps that act as a realistic barometer, like these two here, like Sean and John, they're hoopers. Like the day I met them, just talking hoop with them, like they live it. It's their craft. There's no surprise that they're pros. They play Division I. I mean, Sean had an interesting journey through the JUCO route, but he wanted it. And then obviously he had the talent and the mindset to have it come to fruition. Again, we talked a little bit about Carroll's career at UHart. So, you know, these guys are an exclusive group of players, really anywhere in the world, right? And it shows that they're pros now. But if you can get over and see that up close and personal as you're navigating the leaving cert situation, as you're navigating, you know, what your fit is, this is only going to help that open-mindedness that you need to have to eventually land where you should land and to create those opportunities. So if you can come to a, you know, and I won't get into all the different, I'm sure, Paul, we can put out some of the camps, obviously within the country. Sport Dream Academy, you know, fits that bill with all the players that have gone out of SDA onto the States. But in the States, there's a number of them, even in my area in the Northeast, that you're going to play against the very kids that you're competing for spots against. And you'll get a good barometer, or be a good measure of where you are talent-wise, skill development-wise, the whole gamut. So I don't know if that helps, but I would agree with John, just to kind of add to that, that absolutely, and it helps you make a decision that is a larger investment of time and money on the back end when you come back, because you'll have that data of what you're facing in the States.
That's great. Paul, I might ask you this one. Subject-wise, does it matter what subjects people take during the leaving cert in order to go to their stats for American tests example?
No, it doesn't. It's a good question. Basically, the transcripts process, there's a slide on there that referred to it, but they basically the program that is a Leaving Cert education covers often the key fundamentals that the high school system requires. So English is one of them, mathematics is another, a science subject, which again we have to take. So we're kind of with the way we're structured here, we're actually set up where that's not an issue. So you shouldn't feel like you're picking subjects, in order to try and get an opportunity. Pretty much pick the subjects that you want to do, and that will work for you.
One that you might answer between yourself and Drew here. There's a few questions come in about the transition year. One of them, you mentioned hosting. Do they get hosted? Is there an opportunity for them to be hosted? And also, is it beneficial for them to go to the States for their transition year? But then if they go for their transition year, are they really looking to stay after that, or can they come back and then go back out again after leaving cert?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. So with the TY, the reason I was saying that it could be firstly, there's not, if you think about the third level education and even prep school and high school, but certainly prep, but definitely college, there's a lot of infrastructure there in order to, like, recruitment is active, right? At the high school level, it's not, it's informal. So, and rightly so, like, so firstly, it's harder maybe to get an opportunity, but if an opportunity arose where, again, through your own network, that you might know a high school coach that really likes your game, and you're in third year, and it could be a chance to go over, and if it suited you financially and all the rest, it would be a good experience if it was the right setup. Typically, because it's informal, Matt, there is a hosting element to it, unless it's a prep school like what Drew coaches at, where it's like a boarding school essentially. But either way, there's either a coach and his family or a friend of the coach that'll kind of take you in and give you that almost exchange student experience. And with that year, then you get to see what academics are like. You get to see what it's like playing against a high level in the States. If you're very successful there, you know, and you really, you know, it's something that the coach wants to continue, an opportunity might come where actually it's they kind of say, why don't you stay for your senior year? And, you know, and that might be something that could arise after it. Alternatively, if that's not there, you know, you could come back and you can do your 5th and 6th year here in Ireland, and you won't lose any academic ground here. And then you still, with that experience, and if you continue to develop, you might have an opportunity for prep school or college afterwards. So that's why it's kind of, I would say the reason it's recommended if it's a possibility for you is because it's a low risk opportunity, and at the younger level, because you're younger, you've got more opportunity to kind of see what the standards like and make some connections. But as I said, it's very informal. So I know people that have done that. It's either been through exchange programs or it's been through a friend who happens to know somebody who coaches and there's an interest there, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, basically both could happen where it ends up, the opportunity is that you stay in high school, but that's a decision that depends on how well it goes for you, how much you like the experience. And as a family, you know, is that something that works? Because I do, like, you have to weigh into account the risk of, if something doesn't go wrong, you have to come back obviously and get sorted with the Irish academic system. So yeah, I hope that answers it correctly, but it's a low risk option if it happens to be there for you, and if the opportunity is right. And that's the other thing, the opportunity has to be right. You know, it has to tick all the boxes. It would be worth looking at if it was there for you.
Great. Maybe one for Drew. You touched on this a little bit. How do you know what the right school or the right coach is in terms of fit?
Well, you know, obviously you see the transfer list every year, which has been out of control for some time here in the States, you know, and John and Sean are well aware of that. It's, you know, you go into the NCAA portal and just the vast amount of kids and players looking at transfers is just absurd. And I think, you know, the truth is in the middle with that. I definitely think us as coaches and mentors can continue to do a better job presenting ourselves in an honest way, what we do, you know, as coaches, our programming, et cetera. But I also think players, to Sean's point, like, there's so much information available now. Like I could go study Sean Flood's game by just looking up old footage. I could look into John. Like, I can find out so much by doing homework and doing research. And one of the things that's amazing to me, and maybe it's just a product of the age bracket that we coach or just that time in your life, you know, there's more you can do to equip yourself with the right information to figure out what the fit is. So what I would say to every young player in Ireland, you know, go to a site like the Independent Association of Independent Schools. Go to the NCAA.org site. Paul pointed out earlier, there's a whole database how you can search schools. And then once you get into those schools, you can find out who the coaches are. You can look at the bios. Do they have a connection to Europe or to Ireland? You can go through their roster. You know, you can put those players into YouTube. You can find old footage to study the style. Obviously, if you can talk to a coach directly, that's the best way to do it. And you can reach out to those coaches through their websites. Most of them, except for a number of them at the highest level, like a Coach Calipari or Coach Krzyzewski, Coach K, most of them you can get to through their public websites or school websites. Now, it may take them, you know, I know as a prep school, even though I'm not a college coach anymore, even as a prep school coach at the highest level, I get inundated with hundreds of emails. So sometimes, you know, even I'm a little slow to reply to all those. But at some point, if you're a recruiter and you're trying to build your program, bringing the best talent, you're going to get back to those people, even if it's, you know, with a no. So just take the extra effort, not to rely on mom, dad, your guardian, or someone else to do the work for you. Like Sean and John said this themselves, like, they wanted it and they wanted it badly. So they were constantly looking for ways to connect the dots to create those opportunities and find out what the right fit would be. So do your homework, work your craft, you know, have urgency about tracking people down, you know, including people like, you know, Coach Schwedhelm, who's a dear friend of mine, does an excellent job in the States trying to help kids and has obviously helped guys internationally. Sean mentioned that. So there's a lot of resources, but the kids have to do the work. The players have to do the work. They put a little more urgency into doing that work and doing their research. They're going to realize that there's a lot of people right below their nose that want to help. There's always as Paul said, there's always a vulnerability to this. Like, things don't work out sometimes, but I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that kids can do with the amount of information available today, right, in 2020, that can at least put them on the path to finding their answers. A little bit of a long-winded answer. I don't know if Sean or John wants to add to that as players who went through the process, but you got to work your craft. You got to stick your nose in it and track down the information and the people that can help you. Is that, does that make sense, or is that in line with what you guys think?
Yeah.
Hey, could I add to that really quick?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Like, if I get interest from a new pro team, I automatically look up who the Americans were there last year, and then I message one of them on Instagram and see what the real story is. You can basically do the same with colleges or prep schools. You can find anyone, and guys are willing to help. And if the coach isn't a good guy or whatever, they'll give you that information, or most times they'll say he is a good guy. So you can do it through Instagram or Twitter and find out a lot of stuff that way. So I'd say that's a good thing to do.
Just to touch on what John said there. So I've obviously been part of at Longwood. I've got messages from guys who we've been recruiting, asking, right, this is what coach told me, what's the real situation? So as John was saying, in terms of reaching out to Americans who have played at his previous pro clubs, the players aren't going to lie to you. If the player doesn't like the coach, he's gonna tell you how it is. The coach can tell you everything you want, but the players, and it's kind of more times than not the majority, the players will be on the same kind of page, and they'll give you more of an honest answer than the head coach or one of his assistants, obviously, who works for him. So, and like Instagram, it's such a great resource these days for being able to do things like that. So get on that as well.
Just to add to, guys, the in terms of the fit, as the guys all pointed out, you can do your research on the school, but if you're a very academically sound student, you really want to look at academic prep schools or colleges that will give you, outside of basketball, the type of education you're looking for. And that's one thing to keep in mind. And then I would say, just from my own dealings as well with different coaches throughout the years and different programs, you can tell a lot as well from how they engage with you. If you're in a situation where you're getting a good bit of interest, I would say certainly that, how coaches engage, how they connect with not just you, but with your family. Are they looking beyond just your basketball ability? And are they making sure, like, if you're going over to high school and they're hosting family situation, is that the right family? And are they going to make sure that you as a person are looked after? And the majority of the time that is the case, but you have to do your due diligence on that, and be comfortable as a family, whether it's an athlete and parents, brothers and sisters, that you're going to a right situation. So I would be, collect all of that data along with everything the guys said there, and you'll know pretty quickly kind of what feels right.
Can I just add one other thing to that? Just in terms of increasing your chances of getting replies, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a direct tweet from someone, or a, obviously an email, and it's like, yo, like to play for your program, hit me back. Like literally reaching out to the head coach. And I realize there's certain players in the world that are so good that they get a little leeway in that. But at the end of the day, that karma, that approach comes back to hurt even those players. It goes back to what John was saying about the level of selfishness. How you do one thing is how you do everything. I said that on a recent, webinar that we were on with Matt and Paul. Like, your attention to detail. If you send a professional email, dear coach so-and-so, whether it's a head coach, associate head coach, recruiting coordinator at any level, and you have a nice introduction, not to nauseam, not a whole story. We don't need to see your whole story. We're getting hundreds of these emails. A paragraph introducing yourself professionally. Obviously, you don't have to go over the top with it sounding overly academic. It needs to be authentic to what your personality is, but good grammar, good language, professionalism. And in there, you should have your highlight film, 2.5, 3 minutes. Your highlight film should not be against the Mary School of the Blind. It should be against, good competition, you know, where, you know, they're seeing decisions being made. They're seeing a level of skill, you know, again, going back to shooting the basketball, you know, are you showing that you can read and react and convert, you know? And that's why, you know, camps like the SDA or even select camps, if you're fortunate enough to come over for a camp or two, you can get good footage to present yourself in the right way. But you should have an introductory paragraph about who you are, what your academic profile looks like, highlights 2.5, 3 minutes. And then obviously if it's reciprocated, you're going to have at least one, as Paul said, one full game ready to go as a follow-up, so we can get a further evaluation. And then on top of that, going back to the networking, have obviously your contact information in there, not just, you know, your social media, but your direct mobile, your parents, you know, guardians, your accurate email addresses. I've also had this where, like, I try to reply to an email, it's the wrong email. So, and then have some people that you vetted your play with, you know, whether it's former players like Sean and John, or a Coach Hall, Coach Cummins. So if we see that reference on there, like, wow, like Paul Cummins is saying that this kid's legit, right? Whether it's coming out of Sport Dream Academy or what have you, naturally, we're going to take more of an interest, and you're going to be able to separate yourself from the hundreds and hundreds of emails that coaches at all levels in the States are getting. I mean, there's millions of players around the world that are trying to go to the top countries to play ball, and the U.S. happens to be one of them. So I don't know if that helps, but it's not, you know, and then if something from there, you get into a relationship with a coach and you're going back on Instagram and Twitter, that's great. And obviously I totally agree with what the pros on this call, you know, they're not far removed from their playing days. Like, reach out to other players through all these different avenues, you know, social media channels. Like, again, do your homework. If you really want it, you're going to find the information, you know, accordingly.
And I just, one thing on what Drew said there as well. So from playing for the two different coaching staffs at Longwood and at Santa Fe already, so I'm 2 years removed from Santa Fe, this year 1 removed from Longwood. I've already had coaches from Santa Fe. They'll get stuff from Irish players, and same at Longwood. I've had coaches reach out to me now about 4 different players back in Ireland. That's all what part of Drew was saying, building your database and connections. Can this player, can this coach go and vouch for me? So when people are in the gym who have played at a level that you've desired to play at, make sure you're performing at your best so that they can go back and honestly say, yeah, that's a guy you want to have on your team. Because to be honest, it's our reputation as well on the line. We don't want to, I'm sure John will be the same, we don't want to recommend players to coaches if we don't think they're going to be able to get the job done. And that hurts the next Irish guy, the next Irish girl who's trying to follow in the footsteps that we could potentially give a good recommendation to. So always know that people in the gym who've played at that level get texts. Like, I've got texts all the time now about, hey, do you know this kid in Ireland? Is he able to help us win? Is he able to play at this level? So just be aware of that as well.
And find that hook. Last thing I'll say there, because I agree with that wholeheartedly. Find the hook. Don't send a blanket email. Like, in fact, I've gotten a few emails actually from, and I say this with all due respect, but from some players in Ireland, because they know obviously that I know you guys and I'm involved and I enjoy coaching over there when the opportunity, you know, presents itself. And I've had families and kids send like blanket emails, and that's not, hundreds of those are coming in from all around the country and world at this point. Like, have it personalized, and then find a hook. Like, if you know Sean Flood and he's willing to endorse you, use that. John Carroll is same across the board. You know, it has to be genuine. It can't be disingenuous if you're not that level of player. But you need to separate yourself from not just 480,000 players in the States, but now with the world being flat and technology the way it is. And I mean, the pros in Europe, again, 20% of the NBA is now foreign. It's a global game. So you're competing against everyone in the world, you know, from that Scholastic up through Division I. Find a hook. Tell your story in a concise way, but tell a story where that coach says, oh, he knows so-and-so, or that person knows so-and-so. You're increasing your chances of getting into communication with those coaches and programs.
Right. Right. We'll just get a couple of quick ones here. There's plenty more to come, so I just want to get through a couple of quick ones. Paul, you might get this one. Is the level of Irish education higher than the States?
It's a good question. It's very, I would say it's different. It's very different. Honestly, my evaluation of it is it depends what school you go to. On a whole, I would say I definitely think the Irish education system really prepares students very well for American system. But there are different levels. Like certain public schools just aren't as academically sound as certain private schools in the States. That's just a reality. If you're talking about high school, for example, and I know like Drew coaches at Choate, which is a very academic focused school, and there's other schools that aren't as academic, right? But what I would say is that I don't think one is higher than the other necessarily, but I do think Ireland prepares you very well. The big difference, and I pointed this out, is the continuous assessment versus the kind of focus on chunked state exams. So one thing that would be a good habit if you're a very, very good player and you're going to have these opportunities, start looking after your grades on a continuous basis, because when you get over there, it's weekly quizzes that you have to do well on, because if you don't do well on those, your GPA takes a hit and that narrows your opportunities.
Perfect. Is 6th year too late to try to get to the States?
So 6th year, it is late. I'll be honest with you, that is late because coaches are already kind of recruit. Drew will tell you this. Like Drew coaches at the prep school level, he's looking at potential recruits at the age of 14, and that's prep school. So it is challenging. Okay, having said that, it's not impossible, because you're still, even if you're in 6th year and you finish and you do your leaving cert, you've still got potentially junior college division 1, 2, 3, obviously, but then you also could do a prep school year where you go as a PG. So if you're a rising 6th year, like if you're going into 6th year, but you're a good player, you're academically sound, I would say get on it immediately to start generating interest. And where you'd look at is prep school and then junior college division 3, 2, 1.
Okay, just one final one. Education is reclassing a good option when you get to the States?
Yeah, I think it's it probably is. I mean, you have to think about your age and what you want to do in life. But if you're very much focused on being as good as you can be as a basketball player, as well as giving yourself the best chance of success both on and off the court, reclassifying does give you an advantage, because you basically have a bit more time essentially to get used to the educational system. You get a bit more time in terms of playing. So for example, if you're a 5th year here, and you ended up going over, if you could kind of do a senior year in a prep school and then a PG year, that gives you more time. The one thing you have to keep in mind though is you might be graduating a bit older. You might be a year older than everybody else, and that has to suit your own circumstances. But it's certainly, I think it's a pretty good idea if you're okay with graduating a year later in terms of your age.
I also think Matt, if I can just add that, I think logistically, just from a recruiter, like from a coaching standpoint, you have to understand that, and I said this to you guys before, outside of a handful of schools, that are more like a basketball factory types, setup where they're getting 8, 9, 10 new kids and PGs every year. Most of us, especially the more academically tiered schools, we're only getting 3 or 4 PGs, 4 at most a year. So, you're really trying to thread the needle, unless you're in the group of a John, Sean, obviously Paul's background as a player, former player, like you're threading the needle. So we need to make sure of those 3 or 4 PGs, like those guys can hit the ground running, and that they're top flight players, hopefully scholarship level players from the get-go. The underclassmen recruiting is a little more broader. There's not as much pressure to thread that needle both ways, from my standpoint, recruiting out, but also kids coming in. So, sophomore, junior, and again, I don't get in the weeds with the leaving cert and all that, because that's not my, I have an understanding of it, but you guys are obviously much more educated to the dilemma there and the decision that to be made. But I will tell you, if you are a kid, especially a middle tier kid that's pursuing this dream of playing in the States, the more exposure and the more years you can be here, I think it does aid you, not only getting in, because again, there's not as much pressure as coaches to recruit underclassmen, but then it gives you a chance to really measure up and get acclimated and figure out what the long-term play is. And then the last thing I'll say this, because I know we're closing up, I just wanted to bring up one more thing that Sean said. He talked about how as a pro, he's constantly had to make decisions on the fly and really navigate a lot of different things that even in college you didn't have to. And that's why this whole process of you kids trying to chase your dreams, inevitably it's a win for you, because what you're doing is you're sharpening your entrepreneurial mindset. You're sharpening a process at chasing a life passion. Yes, it will end, but the process at working your craft, hunting down coaches, hunting down information, getting honest feedback, making a turn here and then having a pivot there. That whole obsession about the process around something you love, obviously basketball at this point in your life, you can't lose if you work that process. And when this does end, maybe you didn't get to the exact school or exact level or exact Irish team, but you can now carbon copy that process of the ebbs and flows of that and just the urgency and passion about it. And you can transition that into anything you do in life.
Great. Just want a few questions here about the women's side of the game. First of all, in terms from a basketball point of view, we kind of plucked this talk out of the elite camp, which this part would have been run by Sports Team Academy and Paul, and something he's talked about before. So the people on the call were the ones that were going to do it at the time. But certainly there is plenty of experience from the women's side in Ireland. We have tried to get someone to do a similar talk on the women's side, but in terms of someone hosting, we haven't managed to get them yet. But what I would say is, if you go to Basketball Ireland YouTube channel, we ran a conference, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago now. We had Susan Moore, NCAA Division 1 coach and leading female Irish scorer. John, unfortunately, she had 2,340 points. But she talked a lot about the Irish side of the game. There's also there's also Behind the Ball series that Basketball has been doing. Jenny Kelly, that's available on the website and on the YouTube channel. Louise Galvin, Rachel Van der Waal. I think last night, night before, we had the Maguire sisters, who are currently playing Division 1 basketball in the States, were on it. So there's some great opportunities to see some from our leading female athletes at the moment and have them hear them talk about these particular subjects. So if you get a chance to go on and look for those. One of the questions that came in was, what's the level of women's NCAA compared to Irish women's basketball? I don't know who's best for that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Matt. Well, firstly, absolutely, just to keep in mind as well, guys, everything we've talked about here applies to both men's and women's basketball. The actual process and structure is identical, and all the words of guidance and advice and the directories and the links and all of that stuff, it's very much the same. So you can take that information and apply it no matter whether you're male or female, and what your dream is in terms of the basketball career you want. The level of I would say, to be quite honest, the women compared to men in Ireland punch a bit above their weight in the US compared to men. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that women tend to be in Irish basketball setting a little bit more athletic in comparison to the men when you look at the like for like in terms of athleticism in certainly the NCAA Division 1 scene. And the other thing is, women, are in Ireland have a better skill set in comparison. So the level is still a lot better. And everything we said in this presentation applies. It's more competitive, it's more athletic, the defensive pressure is much high, the coaching is much more intense, the details are much more detailed, right? So there's all of that's there. But what I would say is, like for like, female Irish basketball players actually are compete a little bit better when they go over to the States, like for like, and it's just due to the skill set and the reduction in athleticism.
Just on the camp, I know before, Paul, we did run SDA camp for women before. Just ask a question there about there being one in the future.
Yeah, certainly. That's the plan. And we're very excited about the future of SDA. I know John and Sean are going to be more involved for sure. And Coach Drew is always going to be involved. And there's going to be other coaches as well, including, and we've had fantastic female coaches in the past, like Orla O'Reilly and Erin Bracken, and they'll be back as well. So the plan is to do it again. What I will say, I don't know what the audience breakdown is here, but I'm sure there's a lot of female basketball players and families. I will urge you to come to camp, because we ran 2 years of SDA with women as well, and we just didn't get the numbers. So I don't know whether it's I don't know why actually. I think maybe it appeals maybe more to male players to think, oh, this is something I'm going to go and do great in and get a scholarship. But that's not the point. The whole idea is that you develop your game. That's the first and core principle of SDA, that you leave camp better than you came to camp. And that applies to men and women. So we do plan hopefully to run women and men's camps in the future. But I would urge you to, when we do, please come, because you'll benefit from it.
Two quick ones, two more here. Paul, you might answer this one quickly. Is 6'2" too small to be a point guard? To be a shooting guard, I'd say not unless you've shrunk since you were there.
Well, the fact that I'm 6'2.5" on a good day, no, I would say absolutely not. I think absolutely not. As the guy said, it's all about your skill set, And for me, I was similar to John. I was one of the most athletic players here, but when I got to the States, I wasn't. But what I did do very quickly was adapt and change my game, and I really worked on my outside shooting, and that became my niche. To kind of further my own career. So if you've got a good skill set, Matt, ball handling, you're a good passer, you understand the game, you make good decisions, and you really become, for example, a knockdown shooter, that'll be key. One of the big things, if you're an undersized shooting guard, and 6'2" would be an undersized shooting guard, is you have to be good at reading defenses, and you have to be good at moving without the ball. Okay, moving without the ball, reading screens, making sure that all you need is 6 inches just to get your shot off. And if you're a good enough shooter, and if you've got thousands of shots in and you've really practiced, that's all you need to basically be a very effective shooting guard at 6'2" at the highest level.
Okay,
Matt. Let me say one thing to that. All the small, I'm 5'10", so the guys on this panel know I'm not dunking on anybody. To Coach Cummins, to Paul's point, but that starts in your workouts. When you're by yourself, obviously COVID-19 has put a huge monkey wrench in all this. But when we come out of this, of COVID, and you're back in the gym or back at a basket, 95% of your shooting workouts should be on the move. Like Sean mentioned about Steve Nash, I want everyone to go on, any of the interested shooters, combo guards, shooting guards, go on and look up what is it, Sean? Like the 20-minute Steve Nash shooting workout, where he comes in. It's an older video, but it hammers the point home, and he shoots constantly without stopping for 18 to 20 minutes, and he's exhausted, and everyone knows how that is. But to Paul's point, you're going to have to be able to get your shot off, especially as a smaller guard, and that's obviously basketball IQ. But in order to realize your basketball IQ, you got to have great conditioning and great strength, and be able to last, in terms of making those reads and getting your shot off. So that starts by yourself or with your workout buddy in your practices, in your workouts. You got to shoot more so on the move than anything else. Most players that go to any level can hit 10 stationary shots. Can you hit 9 for 10 after being exhausted because you're reading and reacting to actions?
Just on that as well, that just ties into what John was saying as well earlier. It's important to, when you're in the gym, you're getting game reps. It's not just in the gym, I'm there for 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day. You're in there, you get in, you get your work done, you get out. It's important to spend time in the gym, but when you're in the gym, you're there with a purpose. You're there practicing, replicating what you're going to do in the actual game of basketball. If you're a powerful 5-man, powerful 5 girl who plays on the block, like, do that while you're in the gym. Just work on game situations for you.
Just on the final one for Sean and for Drew, really. On point guards, what in particular are coaches looking for from a point guard, and what should they be trying to work on?
You can go ahead, Drew.
Okay. Just from a coaching standpoint, I know the game again has become very positionalist. In fact, when the ball's inside to an effective 4-man or 5-man, he's the point guard or she's the point guard. I've seen great point guards that catch the ball on the block, meaning the concept of being a point guard, the decision making, the facilitating. So, really, when you have the ball, in a lot of ways, you're the point guard, right? That's broadly speaking. But specifically, the way the position is, you need to be someone who obviously is, as I said, in great shape, right? Can handle pressure 94 feet, can make good, quick decisions under stress and duress, can facilitate, is obviously an extension of the coach on the floor. I always tell our kids at Choate, I need the point guard to be a piece of software out there. I know the floppy disks, they're long gone, right, Matt? But if you put that floppy disk in, that computer is going to work. And that's like a point guard. It's an extension of the coach. It's a very coachable and willing learner. Now, it doesn't mean the point guard I was a point guard, Sean, a point guard. You're not going to agree with everything that comes from the top down from the coach, but it's then being able to communicate in a world where we're constantly on our thumbs and in our devices. You have to be here. You have to have self-awareness and an awareness for what's going on around you, one with the X's and O's, but also with the team dynamics. You got to be a great communicator. And that's a skill you got to work on. Some people are more natural communicators and leaders than others, but you have to be able to facilitate what the team and what the program is trying to do to win. I'll just leave it at that. I'll let you talk about any more specifics, Sean, but the really good point guards are definitely multi-dimensional. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, just on what Drew was saying in terms of like being software or whatever, like obviously when you go to America, a big thing is scouting reports and stuff like that. I'm sure you do on national teams too. You should know the scout, like the players on the other team 1 through 5. Who does what? Do they go left? Do they prefer to go right? What do they do when they go left? Do they like to pull up? Are they a better passer going left? You need to kind of know the scout 1 through 5 on the other team. And I would say being in as a guard, you should be in the best condition. So as a point guard, I feel you should be in the top condition, like physically on the team. You need to be able to pick up 94 feet, be able to get picked up 94 feet, not get tired or taken out of your rhythm. Obviously, yes, you're going to get tired. You need a quick blow. You need a quick break, sit down. But you need to be able to be in the best shape possible to give yourself and the team the best chance of being successful. Obviously, the more you're on the floor, the more kind of comfortable the team should be, the more calm other guys around you should be. But I feel obviously know what's going on with you, with the team. Now, obviously, the sets 1 through 5, where people should be able to confidently direct them. Like by you knowing what you're supposed to be doing offensively and defensively, it'll kind of give the other players confidence when you're directing them on exactly what they should be doing. So be in the best shape possible, I'd say. Know the scout offensively and defensively, and then just kind of, as Drew was kind of saying, be a good communicator, be a people person. Don't just hang around with the 1, 2, 3 people on your team. And work throughout the team and get to know different people and what like interests are outside of sports as well. Just kind of the more you know your people, the more successful they'll be for you.
That's great. I think that's it from question-wise. So if anyone else does have a question or wants to raise a virtual hand, otherwise we'll probably leave it there. Look, just want to say a big thanks to Paul, Drew, John and Sean. Some great information there. Obviously, during this downtime, it's been a great opportunity for us to answer some more of these questions and get some more of this information out online through various webinars. And there's plenty of stuff out there, as I mentioned at the moment. If you go and have a look on the Basketline YouTube channel and the social media channels, there's a good bit that you can go and catch up on. But at any time, if you're looking for some advice on these kind of things, you can reach out to the office, and whilst we can't always answer the questions, we'll try and put you in communication with other people that do and have been through those experiences. And there's a lot of good people around the country, as the guys have mentioned, that have experience and have knowledge. Don't think we've any more questions there. So, look, thanks so much, guys. I'll stop the recording here. I will send out Paul's presentation along with some of the links I mentioned. And hopefully in the next 3 to 7 days, we'll have the full webinar available up on probably the YouTube channel and the social media channels. So I'll just stop recording there if that's okay. And thanks for your time tonight, guys, and much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.